Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. In this video, I'm sharing an Action Wobble thank you card with a Garden Birds stamp set. All supplies I'm using for this project are listed and linked in the video description below for your convenience. The Garden Birds stamp set is among my favorites lately. It is quite unique as it allows you to create a colorful bird and decorate it too. You have two birds in this set as well as two sets of wings. One bird is facing left and the other is facing right. I like to use at least two colors of ink when stamping each part of the bird to add color variation and interest and some shading too. I used seafoam and surf ink colors to stamp the body of the bird. I added the darker surf color onto the tail, fading it into the body. I use my finger a lot as a blending tool whenever I stamp images in this way. I just lightly tap to blend the ink on the stamp surface to avoid having harsh lines between the different colors of ink that I'm using. I'm also using my Misti Stamping tool, and of course, this allows me to double and even triple stamp my images, and that's super helpful whenever I do this sort of stamping. Next, I need to add wings, and for this, I'm using the two designs that are facing left. The bird will end up having two different wing designs, but I don't think that matters much, plus it adds quirkiness and interest. I'm stamping the blue wing in surf ink and also adding a little bit of ocean at the base, again, to add color variation and shading, and then the green wing is stamped in celery and lime-licious colors. The stamp set also includes some fabulous and very easy to stamp layering flowers, but there aren't any leaves. And what I've found is that when I stamp the flowers and add them to my card, the project lacks greenery. So I opted to stamp one of the wings in green ink so that it could fill in that green void on my finished project. Now, as for the flowers, these are layering. There are two layers and a center. I stamped several flowers in colors cheeky and blush, melon and cantaloupe, and peachy and grapefruit. And all of these are the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks. As for the flower centers, I stamped those in black using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and that's the ink, the black ink that I'm using for all of the black stamping on this card. When I was stamping the flowers, the ink on the bird had a little bit of time to dry, and now I can go back to the bird and stamp the bird detail. Now, I didn't want to stamp the bird detail right away as the ink was still wet there because remember, we triple stamped that body. And adding more ink on top of wet ink would have caused it to bleed, and this would have resulted in a blurry impression. So I waited a little bit, and now I'm stamping the little flowers onto the bird's chest. Because the ink is dry, this stamping is going to be nice and crisp. Now, if you find you lose the little centers, the flower centers, you can add them using a white pen, and that's what I did for my bird, although I skipped filming that part, so you're not seeing that on video. There's also a face for the bird, and I stamped that again in black ink. The coordinating dies for this stamp set will cut every single image out, except for the tiniest flowers, but every other image will be die cut. I've cut mine and I used glue to adhere the wings onto the bird. And again, because the wings are separate, you have different options as to how you can assemble your bird. Maybe you want the wings positioned slightly differently, so you can do that. I also die cut a little banner, and this is probably my favorite part of this stamp set. This banner is so clever. The banner is two-part, and this allows you to attach it to the bird, making it look as if the bird is holding the banner. There are also several sentiments in this set that follow the curve of the banner and fit perfectly inside of it. My card is actually going to have several sentiments. The main one reads, "Thank you," and I'm stamping the main sentiment onto a white cardstock panel. The sentiment comes from the Clean Line Gratitude stamp set from Kathy Zilski. Now, I also heat embossed a sub-sentiment for this card. It reads, "You have been so kind," and I embossed it in detail white embossing powder onto yellow cardstock. Lately, I have been using colored cardstock instead of black for these sub-sentiment strips, and I have to say, I really love that pop of color that these sub-sentiment strips provide. This might be just my new thing, using colored cardstock instead of black for the sentiment strips. I used a banner die from my stash to die cut this strip. I first erased the leftover anti-static powder using a pencil eraser, and that's how this is going to go over the main stamped sentiment. I figured I wanted to add a little bit of interactivity to this card, so instead of just foam mounting the bird above the sentiment, I opted to use a mini wobble spring. The wobble spring is perfect in size to hide behind the bird and add that fun and unexpected movement to this project. I adhered the bird above the sentiment, and isn't this adorable? I love the way the bird moves. Next, I added the little yellow banner. I added glue only onto the tip of the banner and left the other end free from glue to allow it to flow in the air. This panel, by the way, was trimmed down. I believe I cut it to 3.5 by 4 3/4 inches. I foam mounted the yellow sentiment over the main sentiment, and next I foam mounted the flowers, creating a bit of a colorful floral background for this card. Now, this stamp set also features some additional tiny flowers, and I love those. I think they complement the main flowers so well. I stamped several tiny flowers next to the big ones and also overlapping parts of the sentiment. I used yellow and peach inks for the 2 larger flowers, and then to add more green, I stamped the smallest flowers in green as if to mimic leaves. I figured, why not? I can stamp more flowers in green ink and they will add that much needed pop of green onto this card, and they can look like fake leaves, I guess. I've now mounted my panel onto an A2 card base. I covered the front of the card with some pale peach cardstock just to add a little bit of color. And finally, I embellished the flowers with a few silver gems. Super easy card for today, but I hope you feel inspired to create. If you make a card inspired by this video, as always, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.